Snow fell over Blackthorn territory the night everything changed. The pack had gathered in the great stone courtyard for the annual moon ceremony, torches burning along the walls, hundreds of wolves standing shoulder to shoulder beneath a full silver moon. At the center of it all stood Lyra Ashford, hands folded, chin lifted, trying to look calm while her heart pounded against her ribs. She was mate to Draven Cross, Alpha King of Blackthorn. For 2 years, she had worn that title like armor, even as whispers followed her everywhere she went. Human-born. Not pack blood, not worthy of the throne. She had told herself the whispers did not matter, that Draven's word was the only one that counted. Tonight she would learn how wrong she had been. Draven stood a few steps ahead of her, broad-shouldered and golden-eyed, dressed in the black and silver of his family line. He had not looked at her once since the ceremony began. She told herself it was nerves. Kings had duties. Kings had eyes on them from every direction. She told herself many things that night, and every one of them was a lie she needed to believe. When the elder finished the opening blessing, Draven stepped forward and raised his hand for silence. The courtyard quieted at once. "Tonight, I make an announcement," he said, his voice carrying easily across the crowd. "For too long, this pack has questioned the strength of its future. I will not lead Blackthorn into another generation with doubt at its heart." Lyra felt the first cold drop of fear slide down her spine. She did not understand yet. She only knew something was wrong. "Lyra Ashford was chosen by fate as my mate," Draven continued, and now his eyes did find her, flat and unreadable. "But fate does not always choose wisely. She is human-born. She carries no wolf blood, no pack legacy, nothing that our people need in a Luna. I have decided she is not fit to stand beside the throne of Blackthorn." A gasp rippled through the courtyard. Lyra felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. "I will seek a true mate," Draven said, "one worthy of carrying this pack's future." Lyra Ashford's claim to the title of Luna ends tonight. He turned from her, and a young woman stepped out from the crowd to take his arm, a daughter of an allied pack Lyra had met only once, at a formal dinner where she had not been permitted to speak. The crowd's whispers grew louder, some cruel, some pitying, all of them unbearable. Lyra stood alone in the space Draven had left behind, snow gathering on her shoulders, 2 years of loyalty crumbling into nothing in front of everyone she had ever tried to belong to. She did not cry, not there. She would not give them that. She simply turned and walked into the trees at the edge of the courtyard, her steps steady, even as everything inside her broke apart. She did not know how long she walked. The cold bit through her dress, and the sound of the ceremony faded behind her, until only the wind remained. Eventually she reached the stream that marked the border between Blackthorn and Thornwood territory, and there, finally, she let herself sit down in the snow and cry. She did not hear him approach. Wolves rarely make sound when they choose not to. But she felt the shift in the air, the sense of being watched, and she looked up to find Cade Wolf standing a few feet away, his dark eyes steady on her face. Cade was Alpha of Thornwood, Draven's oldest rival, a man Lyra had met only at formal gatherings where the two packs kept careful, guarded distance. He was tall and quiet, known more for his restraint than for cruelty, which in wolf politics made him unusual. She had always sensed something watchful in him, though she had never understood why. "You shouldn't be this close to my border alone," he said, his voice low. "I wasn't thinking about borders," she answered, wiping her face quickly, ashamed to be seen like this. He didn't tell her it would be all right. He didn't offer comfort she wasn't ready to hear. He simply sat down on a fallen log, a respectful distance away, and looked out at the stream with her, as if her tears were not something to be managed or fixed, only something to sit beside. "I was at the ceremony," he said after a while. "I saw what he did." Lyra's throat tightened. "Then you saw everything. I saw a king throw away the only person in that courtyard with the strength to actually lead beside him." Cade's voice was calm, but there was an edge beneath it, something sharper than anger. "Draven has always confused bloodline for worth. He always will." She looked at him properly then, searching his face for pity and finding none. "Why does it matter to you?" "Because I've watched you for 2 years," he said simply. "At every summit, every gathering, every time your pack tried to make you small, You found a way to stand taller instead. That's not something blood gives a person. That's something earned. The words settled into her chest like warmth after a long cold. She did not know what to say, so she said nothing, and for a while, they simply sat together in the quiet, the stream moving steadily beside them. It was Cade who broke the silence again, but this time he rose to his feet, and something in his posture had changed, become deliberate, become certain. "Lyra Ashford," he said, and his warriors, who had been standing unseen at the tree line all along, stepped forward into view. Word would travel fast after tonight. He clearly intended it to. He knelt before her in the snow, the same snow that had witnessed her humiliation only an hour before, and took her hand in his. "Draven called you unworthy in front of his entire pack," Cade said, his voice carrying clearly to every warrior watching. "I am calling you my queen, in front of mine. Not because I pity you, because I see exactly what he was too blind to see." Lyra's breath caught. She searched his face for some trace of mockery, some hidden motive, and found only quiet, unwavering certainty. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "I know enough," he said. "I know a leader when I see one. Draven mistook your patience for weakness. I never did. She should have said no. She should have needed more time, more proof, more anything before accepting such a declaration from a man she barely knew. But something in her, something that had spent 2 years shrinking to fit inside Draven's shadow, finally straightened its spine. "Then I accept," she said, and the words felt like the first true thing she had spoken in a very long time. Word reached Draven before sunrise. His new pairing had not even survived the night without complications, the allied pack's daughter already troubled by the political weight suddenly placed on her, uncertain if she wanted the throne at all. He barely noticed. His attention was entirely consumed by the news traveling through every pack channel available. His rival had claimed his former mate as queen, publicly, decisively, in front of witnesses who would carry the story to every corner of Wolf territory. Draven told himself it did not matter. He told himself Lyra's worth had never been real to begin with, that Cade was simply making a political move to embarrass him. But in the weeks that followed, as reports came back of Lyra thriving in Thornwood territory, training in combat alongside Cade's warriors, sitting in council meetings where her opinions were sought rather than dismissed, walking through the pack grounds with a steadiness that drew respect rather than suspicion, something uncomfortable began to grow in Draven's chest. It took him far too long to recognize it as regret. Lyra, for her part, barely thought of Draven at all in those first weeks. She was too busy discovering who she could become when no one was trying to make her smaller. Cade's pack welcomed her, with a directness that surprised her, and Cade himself never once acted as though claiming her had entitled him to anything beyond her trust. He gave her time. He gave her space to grow into the title he had handed her that night by the stream, and slowly, day by day, she found herself becoming someone she recognized, someone she was proud of. It was 3 months later that Draven made his move. An Alpha Summit was called, drawing every pack leader in the region together to settle territorial disputes and renew old treaties. Draven arrived with a plan already formed, dredging up an old law rarely invoked in modern pack governance, an alpha's right to contest a mate claim made against his former Luna within a full lunar cycle of her original bonding. The law was ancient and controversial, and most packs had abandoned it generations ago as barbaric, treating mates like property to be fought over, rather than people with their own will. But Draven was desperate, and desperate kings reach for desperate tools. He stood before the assembled leaders and formally challenged Cade for the right to reclaim Lyra as his mate. The room fell into stunned silence. Lyra, seated beside Cade at the council table, felt every eye turn toward her, waiting to see how the two most powerful alphas in the region would settle a fight over her future. Cade rose slowly to his feet, and for a moment, Lyra feared he might actually accept the challenge, might actually agree to fight for her the way Draven wanted, turning her once again into a prize rather than a person. But before he could speak, Lyra stood as well. "There will be no challenge," she said, and her voice, though quiet, carried through the entire hall. Draven's jaw tightened. "This is not your decision to make, Lyra. The law is clear." "The law is about mates," Lyra interrupted. not about property. You made your choice the night you humiliated me in front of your entire pack. You do not get to unmake that choice now, because it became inconvenient. A murmur ran through the assembled leaders, several nodding in quiet agreement. Draven's confidence faltered, just slightly, but he pressed on. I was wrong, he said, and the words seemed to cost him something to say aloud. I let pride blind me to what I had. I am asking for the chance to correct that mistake. Lyra looked at him for a long moment, and for the first time since that night in the snow, she felt nothing but calm. Not anger, not old hurt reopening, just quiet, settled certainty. You are not wrong because you lost something valuable, she said. You are wrong because you never should have needed to lose it to understand its worth. I don't owe you the chance to learn that lesson at my expense. She turned to the assembled leaders. I choose my own mate, not by combat, not by law written for a different age, by my own will, as any leader in this room would demand for themselves. She reached for Cade's hand, and he took it without hesitation, his fingers steady around hers. I choose Cade Wolf, she said, not because he rescued me from humiliation, but because he saw my worth before I found my way back to it myself. That is not something combat can win, and it is not something a challenge can take away. The hall remained silent for a long moment before one of the older leaders, a woman who had led her pack for 3 decades, began to nod slowly, then to applaud, and others followed, until the sound filled the entire chamber. Draven stood alone in the middle of it, the weight of his own mistake settling fully onto his shoulders at last, with no law left to hide behind. He did not challenge again. In the months that followed, his allied pairing dissolved entirely, and Blackthorn standing among the other packs weakened under the reputation he had built for himself that night in the snow. He was left to rebuild, slowly and alone, carrying the lesson he had learned far too late. Thornwood and its neighboring territories flourished under Cade and Lyra's joint leadership. The old rivalry between Cade and Draven quietly reshaped into something new. Lyra became known not as the human-born girl once discarded by a king, but as a queen who had built her place through her own strength, standing beside a leader who had recognized that strength from the very beginning, rather than needing to be taught it by loss. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Lyra still walked to that same stream at the border, the place where everything had changed. She no longer felt the sting of that night in the snow when she stood there. She felt only gratitude. That humiliation, however painful, had led her to a place where her worth was never something she had to fight to prove again. Draven had called her nothing before his pack. Now, standing beside the king who called her everything, Lyra finally understood that her worth had never been his to decide in the first place.